Black Radical Thought, African Philosophy, Africana Humanism, and Decolonial Thought, to mention a few. Zandi is also a mother and a PhD candidate at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Wow, it's very difficult introducing Zandi. Last time when we were in Durban, I referred to SCC, and someone just stood up and said, "Everyone here is a professor, why don't you call her professor?" And all the professors were looking at me as if I'm going to mistitle someone.
Is it on? On? No? Which one?
You have 8 minutes, Mhlekazi.
Okay.
Yes.
I knew Bongani would enjoy that part of giving me time limitations. I do it to him regularly at work. It's a real honor to be here. I'm so happy that you spoke, Professor Nadira, who now, right. So happy. And any mole in the room, I want to add to your misery, because in South Africa, we have many problems, but we can talk. We are allowed to, so you can just get on out of here. You are not invited, not your space. Devin, for being a brother for years, really powerful hearing your work. So you bring news of genocide underway in your homeland. You bring messages of resilience and decades deep hope for liberation from the river to the sea. Your contributions today and in your scholarly and activist work point to this duality, the melancholy of grief and the ways that your mourning sustains aspirations for freedom. Your work narrates the harsh realities of life in occupied Palestine so that no one can say that they did not know. From reading Nadia Shoaib Karavukian's unflinching gaze, I am simultaneously depressed and buoyed. Mostly, it has been a steep learning curve for me and all those who have benefited from your courageous scholarship. Thank you. We are better for your life, for your freedom that we are invested in. We watch with bated breath when you are arrested, and we pray, those of us who pray, those of us who pray in other ways too, for you to live long and to carry on doing the work that you do. You come to South Africa as I continue to think of various iterations of genocide on the continent. As I listen to you today and engage in your rich trove of work in the lead up to this lecture, I found amazing theoretical resonances that illustrate the racist basis of genocide. Fanon's prescient concept of zones of non-being is an apt way of thinking across our spaces. But I want to connect with the grief because our gathering is also effective work. Devin Atala does not shy away from feelings. In the paper that he delivered today, he reminds us, yet it is our grief that liberates us. I follow him and I sit in the melancholy, in the funk, in the depression for a moment by knitting our genocides to each other. Watching the genocidal killings at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, I was reminded of a 2016 visit to Rwanda where a genocide of nearly 1 million people occurred 22 years earlier at the time. Last month, however, we commemorated 30 years of that genocide. I recount a visit to Kinanza, Rwanda, where bodies of about 46,000 people from the area were hauled to the local Catholic church in wheelbarrows and people's backs in the wake of the 1994 killings. When we arrived at the Catholic Church, where over 10,000 Tutsi sought refuge in those first days of April 1994, I was not prepared for the proximity of death, its texture and its scent. It was beginning to rain when the guide took us in and began to give us context to this church of death that had now been converted into a memorial site. Just over 10,000 people had been killed at the church. Guns, a grenade, machetes. The bullet holes remained on the surfaces. The damage caused by the grenade was etched on the concrete just before the door. The skeletal remains here are of 46,000 people. Bodies from predominantly Tutsi area were brought to the church. Too many to bury, and with no family to bury them. People had hauled the dead to the church. I tried not to imagine them burying the dead on their backs. The number of those in the mass graves is known by the count of the number of skulls, not by their names. There are too many to name. Sometimes entire families and no survivors to claim the dead. The DNA analysis has not been done. Since those are bare bones that are of no significance for big capital, there are no funds to conduct DNA analysis. For now and perhaps eternity, they remain unfleshed bare bones. Ashla. To the untrained eye, they are genderless maps. They enable a Rwandan and African imagination of thinking about bare bones and the denial of humanity. Speaking about the value of the Gallows Exhumation Project in South Africa, which followed 1994, and the need to attach names and identities to bare bones, Madeleine Fulhard told the Sunday Tribune in 2012, if in Africa we have piles of skulls, mass graves, and no identification of the names. How we treat the dead reflects on a highly racialized global citizenship. We saw mass excavations of graves in Bosnia of Europeans. How much your death matters reflects on the value of your life. So for us, it's also a project of non-racialism. It's not just about the recovery of remains. It's also about issues of race and equality. Of course, also very powerfully about ending impunity, because people kill people and never expect there to be consequences. Bones disappear, and that's the end of it, she says. The emergence of a person is a powerful statement that their life and death do matter, and of accountability. So the father holding up the flesh of his children, as we've just heard, is one of claiming something from someone who tells you that you are nothing. In Kinanza, Rwanda, sticking out of the tropical downpour, in the eeriest memorializations that I've seen, the rows of church pews were draped in the clothing of the dead. The layers of clothes were stacked high. They were caked in dust. They looked like people stooped over benches, lingering souls that will not rest, dusty and deformed from waiting for salvation in the throbbing silence and emitting a mournful vibration. At the back of the church were coffins stacked 3 high. They were draped in white cloth. A guide pointed to a white-tiled crypt in the ground below the coffins. We walked downstairs, more dead, but in coffins here. The memorization at the Kigali Memorial, on the other hand, in the city, is poignant and well curated. Behind the church, though, hidden under the ground is a grotesque death archive. Church grounds that are also a death camp. The bones are almost haphazard. The skulls were on a long shelf. On the shelf below the skulls were bones from the rest of the body. Many, many bones. I think of the Hutu 10 Commandments that I had seen at the Kigali Memorial. They were all about the punishment of Tutsi women. The commandments, in the commandments, Tutsi women are thingified and the conditions of the extermination laid bare. Women are the canaries in the mine of violence. They bear violence directly and are made into symbols to communicate messages. In Rwanda, women were constructed as carriers of Tutsi blood and thus responsible for bearing the next generation of what was termed cockroaches. The extermination and prohibitions against marrying, befriending, or having them as secretaries or concubines was robbing of flesh and a reduction to bare bones. Prof. Nadira's committed scholarship has shown how women and children are held in disdain. Women for birthing more nuisances that slow down the theft of land for Zionist settler expansionism. Before this hot violence of genocide that erupted in Gaza, that has seen upwards towards 40,000 murders, the process that she describes as stripping them of their humanity while evicting them to zones of death was well underway. Visiting the bones of Rwanda 23 years after the genocide means that I was late to the scene. The untreated bones had begun to disintegrate, and fragments danced in the still air like dust mites. The genocide has happened in waves on the continent. In the Congo, Burundi, Uganda, Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. In Palestine, it is underway, hot and cold violence. And because I respect Bongani, I want to just quickly move to Namibia, Shark Island, that I'm due to go to Dumi in a few weeks. A report on Shark Island has come out as early as last month, April 2024, by Forensis and Forensic Architecture. Shark Island is in Ludwig in southern Namibia. The report tells us this is a site of genocide. It is just one site where mass killings happened as part of the first genocide of the last century. This is where the German settler occupation rehearsed what they would shortly perfect against the Jews in Germany. Shark Island is unique in the sense that it was not only a concentration camp, it was a death camp. It is also unique because it bears testimony to the unprecedented event in Namibia, namely large-scale murder and cruel death of a human group. At the island, women prisoners were compelled to boil the heads of the murdered people, and their skulls were sent to Germany. The report is really fighting a fight against development where they want to flatten the island and where there are mass graves for development and expansion of the port and joining the island onto the mainland. I bring these three structural happenings in Palestine, in Rwanda, and in Namibia. I bring them together because they remind us of time always now, and they reflect on racialization and its necessity for the creation of zones of non-being. Eventually, the occupation of Palestine will be defeated. If the experiences of African memorializations or lack thereof teach us anything, it is that we must always be deliberate in remembering our dead. Remembering is enfleshing the bare bones, enlivening them. How will we remember those murdered in Gaza, Rafah, in the hospitals now turned into concentration camps and death zones? Your work together, Devon and Adira, helps us with this enfleshment. Thank you.
Everyone's leaving the stage.
Dumelang. Salams. Good afternoon to everybody. I think it's been very intense, and so let us just take a deep breath to absorb this solidarity and community and moment of being together. Okay, let me start by saying thank you to the organizers of this event, and especially to Professor Shanaz Safla and colleagues from UNISA for inviting me today and making this happen and persevering despite the circumstances. I feel privileged to have been asked to be a respondent today, and hopefully in some way I will be able to, through this moment, to honor the work of Prof. Tala and Prof. Nadira Shalub-Kevorkian. I hope you don't mind me calling you Professor Nadira for the rest of this time. But also this moment is to honor the lives of Palestinians who have been killed, maimed, tortured, displaced, starved by the apartheid Zionist colonial state enacting genocide. But we are so thrilled to have you here with us, Prof. Nadira and Prof. Devon. And we're so glad you spoke. And I'm wondering why we're speaking, because it would have been just wonderful to engage both of you now, today. Because we've been so concerned about your well-being. And it's crazy that we have to think of this as a miracle that you managed to travel and be here with us today and to be able to speak. It should not be so difficult for a scholar to do her job and speak on an international forum. So know that you are loved and that we are behind you. As you know and as you heard, Prof. Nadira's work is so complex and powerful. I am not sure that I can do justice to it, as well as Prof. Devon's work, which is so deeply moving. But I will try to reflect on some of the things that stands out for me in your work. Prof. Nadira, I became familiar with your work as a PhD student when I was doing work on gender-based violence. And unfortunately, Prof. Atala, I only became familiar with your work more recently. So please forgive me if I don't cover it as much. But I think both sets of work bring to the fore the ways in which everyday humiliation and degradation of Palestinians is critical to reflect on as part of the feminist principle of the personal is political. Prof. Nadira, like other feminists, highlight the important everyday experiences of violence and dispossession to give life to the death and processes of elimination and silencing that is so entrenched in Israeli occupation. These ways of reflecting on the lived experiences of Palestinians, evident in both of your work, brings to the fore the humaneness, the everyday struggles and oppressions, and make them. There have been many October 7th in the lives of Palestinians since 1948 that have been ignored, silenced, and justified. We know that pre and post October 7th, 2023, literally every other day of the year, Palestinians are harassed, killed, maimed, tortured, disrespected, humiliated, dislocated from their homes, lands, families, and communities, and the list of atrocities they face is endless. Yes, yet this colonial settler violences are normalized, invisibilized, or justified by colonial discourses of othering and dehumanization. Even the current genocide, femicide, and scholasticide are being whitewashed and constantly justified by many governments and through the provision of military aid by Western governments. And many myths and untruths continue to be perpetuated through various media outlets. Hence, the work of Prof. Nadira and Prof. Atala are instrumental in doing the opposite of the logic of elimination by bringing to life the denialism and discourses of elimination which are now being challenged through the international student movements and protests worldwide that refuse to be co-opted into the frames of denialism, extermination, and genocide. People all over the world are saying not in our name and challenging the coloniality of power evident in settler occupation and the industrial Western military complex that is complicit in the war on the people of Gaza and Palestine more broadly. Atala and Datta's work similarly shares the stories and narratives, and they state, it is through the, I quote, weaving together, it's not moving. There we go, got it, thank you. I quote, weaving together stories of refusal and community, we demonstrate how our decolonial strivings require us to rediscover ways of being present, being in struggle, and being human together as we work creatively in coalition with our communities. So the first aspect that I'm highlighting in this paper is how Prof. Nadira's work and Prof. Atala's work are embedded in feminist epistemology that foregrounds the experiences of violation and death that have been normalized or hidden to counter the systemic annihilation of people's selfhood, humanity, and self-respect through state and global sanctioned violence. This approach to research and activism also challenges the coloniality of knowledge and brings different forms of knowledges to the fore. This is particularly evident on Prof. Nadira's work on unchilding, which brings the hidden voices of children so strongly into knowledge production, as she has previously done with women in some of her other work where she brings their voices to the fore. From the few interactions I've had with Palestinian children, they are wise beyond their years and are thinking about and dealing with things that they should really not have to. So are most children who are living through wars and conflict, which I think Hugo referred to. But more than that, Palestinian children are represented as criminals and terrorists, which reminds me of Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, or in this case, also a terrorist. Palestinian babies are feared and considered terrorists before they are born and during infancy, even before they can speak, talk, and walk. Young children are seen as threats to the Israeli state apparatus, and thus we see that millions of children have been killed ruthlessly, detained without trial, and remain in prison till this day. Social workers, in particular, should be at the fore of demanding the release with immediate effect of children. Yet many social work international bodies remain silent in the face of serious human rights violations against the entire population, with children in particular being traumatized, victimized, harassed, and killed. The context within which Palestinian children grow up leaves very little room for them to play and have everyday childhood experiences due to constant occupation, securitization, and military checkpoints, which the children called killing boxes, according to Prof. Nadira. Children can't be children in a context where there is ongoing surveillance, harassment, and fear that is created by the Israeli state apparatus, which I think is akin to what Prof. Pumla Gola calls the fear factory. But Prof. Nadira herself is a threat to the Israeli state, as she has emphasized the critical flaws in a system that consistently acts out as though they are the victims and children are constructed as terrorists, making these children so powerful in their acts of resistance with their stones, which are merely peanuts thrown against Caspers and high-end military weapons. Yet they are constructed as dangerous ones. The imagination and discourse of the invading settler Israeli made the peanut-like stones into weapons of mass destruction to justify their ongoing domination, violence, and extermination of a people who refuse to be victims and exterminated in the face of onslaught. So the second aspect that this paper underscores from Prof. Nadira's work is the unchilding that's happening in Palestine and other war contexts. Prof. Nadira then takes this work of unchilding even further and talks about how children are even unchilded in death, and I think that was spoken about a lot, as the Israelis make it difficult for Palestinians to get the bodies of their dead babies. Of course, it is not only the dead bodies of children that are withheld, but all Palestinian bodies that are feared even in death. Attallah and Awartani argue that carceral violence seeks to entrap us in a continual state of loss, rage, and despair, which he spoke to quite a lot earlier. We all know that funeral rites in all cultures are an important part of the grieving process of loved ones, families, and communities. Withholding the bodies becomes another act of terror and trauma for Palestinian communities, where families have to get lawyers and spend many months in court to get a dead body, in another way to traumatize Palestinians. And this is why the humanizing project in the work of Prof. Nadira and Prof. Attallah is so important. Yet, Prof. Nadira states powerfully in an interview in March this year that, I quote, "We are not victims, and we are not even survivors. We are defying and resisting this regime," unquote. We see this resistance in so many ways. One powerful example that Prof. Nadira talks about is the man holding the bag of the body parts he collected, which he spoke to about earlier, as a way of reclaiming firewood. So I'm going to skip a bit about that because Nadira spoke about that. I actually wanted to, I know I'm sort of almost out of time. We know that bodies under, within, and on top of the rubble, sometimes shattered in parts that are unrecognizable, sometimes individual limbs or faces severed from other parts of their bodies are found, and on other occasions, mass graves are uncovered from the rubble, representing the myriad ways in which colonial settler destruction is inscribed in the land, dust, and rubble. As Mbembe describes colonial occupation as writing on the ground a new set of social and spatial relations. The work of Prof. Nadira and Prof. Atala fundamentally challenged the coloniality of power and knowledge by giving power back to the bodies, faces, and dreams that have been dehumanized and invisibilized. Their work is seen as a threat to the Israeli state, and it exposes what is within and under the rubble to share the reality of the terror coming from the Israeli colonial state. I wanted to end my talk with a video, but I don't think we have time for the video, so the video may be played at the end, which is really about the student protests as a way of radical hope that this is the moment now, the moment for change, the moment of real radical hope for the future, which we see in the student protests, inspired by the many social movements for a free Palestine to end the Zionist occupation and apartheid. I believe our young people are the future and will carry this beacon for not just a free Palestine, but a new world order that ends occupation and coloniality wherever it exists. We know that this fight is now not only about a free Palestine, but a world free of oppression and neoliberal capitalist patriarchal power monopolies. We need to destabilize and eliminate the structures that bind us to oppression and coloniality. From the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, a luta continua. Thank you.
Is it fine? Is it fine now? Okay. I was grabbing my phone because I didn't want Comrade Bongani to bully me with time because I was unsettled looking at him at the back there. Ordinarily, we would start by thanking the organizers, the people who've put together this very important conversation this afternoon. But we are not going to do that today because I believe it is not only our duty to be here, gathered this afternoon, but it is what the lifeless bodies of the children of Palestine and Gaza are calling for. So perhaps in honor of their silence, I wish to thank all of you for coming. And I also wish to encourage those of you who are here to take the messages back to your homes because the propaganda machine is very strong. The dominant narrative is winning, especially in communities that don't have access to social media and television. Some of the interesting concepts that came this afternoon: killability and livability, horror and hope, loss and resistance, all speak to a history that we in occupied Tanzania have known too well. 30 years is not a long time to forget the atrocities of apartheid. And yet, we are here today to ask the following questions. What kind of questions emerge when we start challenging dominant narratives that are founded on the logics of elimination, maiming, killing, and genocides? What kind of worlds emerge when we question the dominant configuration of the colonial state as we know it today? What forms of political community begin to surface when we problematize the colonial state and its entanglement with genocide. These are some of the questions that should shape, inform our solidarity with the people of Palestine. As a people who've lived through settler colonialism and its remnants, we cannot move forward without prefacing these questions. We in South Africa know that genocide, colonial violence are the central ingredients of the modern state. Genocide is in the DNA of the colonial state, and therefore, what does it mean to free Palestine? What did it mean to free South Africa pre-1994? Did it mean a disruption to the colonial state as a primary form of political community? Perhaps the people of the Herero and the Nama in Namibia would tell us different. The people of Abiyala, the native people of Abiyala would tell us different. The native people of Australia would also tell us a different truth, because after we have bled, after we have buried our children, after we have buried our loved ones, it is the state that comes to cleanse itself as the ethical political community. And so everything continues. At the center of the nation state is the normalization of death. And so when we hear the stories of the children who were killed before they see the sunrise, when we see their lifeless bodies on our screens, we are not moved because we become numb. We have been numbed by the politics of the state and its normalization of death as a way of life. Death doesn't longer surprise us. It scares us only briefly, because the dominant paradigm of death is the dominant paradigm of the state. The two are hard to separate sometimes. Professor Ala, or Ellen, you speak about grieving for land and loss, a theme that is very familiar to us in occupied Tanzania. I wish to also inform you that grieving for land, or rather grieving for the loss of land, is not grief that will end when you've achieved your freedom. It is a grief that will live with you and continue to haunt your ancestors, because it is a grief that will be reclaimed by the nation states in its project of remaking itself and further dehumanizing futures. It is the settler colonial script. The settler colonial script of Israel is not a new one. What we then need to do is to ask ourselves, what is it that we are failing to learn as its victims? I know I have 4 minutes, so I'm just going to rush. When we center Gaza today, and thanks to you, Professor Nadera, we also center Haiti, we also center Sudan, the Congo, the Yemen, all products of the colonial state and its genocidal structural forms. But when we talk about livability, we inspire hope, we also inspire radical love and radical truth. We also encourage a way of not looking away when we see the dead bodies on the screens, but looking into and seeing the lives in the death of the people of Gaza. Because if we continue to see the death, we are therefore celebrating the victory of the Israelites, of the Israeli state. Looking away at the images is a form of livability that we should reclaim in solidarity with the people of Palestine. And so when you speak about the notion of Ashala, I hope I pronounce it correctly, you invoke the memory of Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu, who, before he was sentenced to death, again by the apartheid state, which continues to live alongside the democratic state, but that's a conversation for another day. Solomon Mahlangu says his final words to us: "My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom. He brings together the element of nature and the element of blood and the body to inspire hope, and perhaps to also say to you that your suffering will never be in vain. Your blood, the bones that are buried under the rebels, will one day speak truth to power. Izwe lethu.
Okay, we're almost there. So our next item is that we will be opening the platform for public engagement. I don't know if we have a roaming mic. Okay, and can my fellow panelists come back to the stage? The respondents, I meant to say, and the speakers, everyone there. Okay. So Jade, are we set with the roaming mics? Okay. So can I please take some hands? We'll start with 3, 4. Okay, noted, Africa. Okay, still coming. Okay. While other people are still preparing themselves, you can come. No, wait, let's wait for them to sit down first. Same, you are also welcome, colleagues. Ningasabi, don't be scared. Okay. Yes. She's going to sit. Okay. No, what you are comfortable with, it's fine. Yes.
When we are gathered here, you know, it shows some support to the Palestinian communities. But the support that what I'm here for, I'm standing up here for, is to challenge us here. Why? How? I would challenge us to leave our PhDs at home and stage a march to United Nations, because it's the one that playing double standards. And then if we be here gathering, talk, we are not different from the Zionist clique there in Palestine. We are not different from Arab League, which said, no, they have nothing to do with what is happening in Palestine. So it's the same as Iraqi government through their embassies here. So I'm standing up here challenging us to talking is good for a short while, because the damage is already continuing. So let's do this. Let's stage a march to the United Nations. Those who will be leaving this country are not off the hook, unfortunately. They will have to organize a march to the United Nations offices until Antonio Guterres feel the pain, and then try and correct the situation there. Thank you.
For a long time I wanted to learn Arabic because it's a beautiful language and I'm hearing it much more now. But I've learned 2 words that I wish I didn't know the meaning of. My friend Haider over there taught me a word, ankat. And for the rest of you, it means rubble. It means rubble. There's ankat all over Gaza. In fact, if you take an aerial view of Gaza, that's all you see. And Prof. Nadira, the second word that I've learned in Arabic today is ashla. And I also wish I didn't know what that meant. I actually spoke to Prof. Nadira earlier on, and it's quite a coincidence that the poem that I read was on grief, which was what the one professor spoke about, and the other professor spoke about the body in the plastic bag. So I have a poem that I'll read later on, because we don't have the time, but it's exactly the poem about the father holding up the bag and the plastic bag. So if anyone's interested, I'll read it later. But I wanted to say that I want to continue to learn Arabic. And the other words I want to learn is about love and reconstruction and about peace. But not peace, but about justice. So I don't have anything more to say except that I want to still learn, but I want to learn those things.
Thank you, comrades. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful panel. I just have a question for UNISA. I would like to know whether UNISA is or has cut all trades with any companies that are complicit in the genocide, whether they are beginning to start implementing boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is a call from Palestinian comrades, as well as making sure that the whole campus is an apartheid-free zone. So I would really like a response to that. Thank you.
Colleagues, do you want to say anything?
So love in Arabic is hub. And loving too much is ishq, which is like really falling in love. So hub and ishq is what we teach in Palestine.
Thanks for that question, Firoza. Is it on? Okay. I'm not from UNISA, so I can't speak on behalf of UNISA, but I think that many South African universities are still complicit. Many still have relationships with Israeli universities and byproducts that are on the lists. So I think we have a lot of work still to do there and a lot of pressure that's needed from communities to support those of us who are trying to get motions to disinvest and sanctions with various universities. But maybe someone else from UNISA would like to talk about UNISA specifically.
Thanks. I'm not speaking specifically about UNISA because I think UNISA follows a similar pattern with all the other universities. But I do want to say that I have never seen university take a stance against injustice. It's always us, the individuals, the institutions, the students who put, pressure to these institutions. So the question is, how do we intensify our individual activism so that we can push pressure on these universities? Power is never conceded, easily. It's wrestled with. So I think that's the attitude we should adopt.
I'm new at UNISA, but I must say the landscape of South African higher education is one of complicity, but UNISA has been clear on message following the government position on the issue of Palestine. Now where the money's sitting, too low down the hierarchy. There are other universities that have not, and those need to be held accountable, even at the level of just semantics, cosmetics, because it's untenable to live in a society that we live in and not be able to say it. This is genocide.
I'm a UNISA alumni, so really, I'm a resident. You can hear me. So I'm a UNISA alumni, and I want to hold the university to account. So we're not talking about buying Coca-Cola and buying some polish. We're talking about the university from a leadership point of view, taking a stand against genocide. So as an alumni, probably be able to organize, but we can't let the university off the hook by saying it's up to universities. The university and its leadership must take a strong position, because all universities academically have relationships with other universities in Israel, in Tel Aviv. We really have to get a clearer response from the leadership of UNISA. The responses up until now, though appreciated, is not enough.
So can we have our second round? Can I see the other group of hands? A round of hands, please, from the floor. Okay, noted, Khatebe. Anyone else? Rabbi? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, for now, let's just go with those two.
Atlantic, and how does that probably give you hope for those ones that are just sort of maybe don't have power to respond to the mass killings that happens every day, and how do you then probably carry on that movement of hope? Because your grief, it's not a grief of that I'm dilapidated. It's a grief that has full of power, has a full of hope. How do you then probably make that grief to be something that keeps you going, gives you some sense of recognition for those that are killed on a day-to-day basis? Because it's one of the things that I was picking up with how you have crafted the grief. It's not a grief that there's no hope. It's a grief that there is hope, irrespective of where we are at the current moment with the Palestinian state.
Sanbonani. Yeah, mine is very short. I was asking in terms of your PSA, that organizations that are doing solidarity work in our communities, okay? We as communities in the informal settlement, in the township, we are left behind, right? So they will come to us, past us to an event, whereas we don't know what is it all about Palestine. So mine is to say, go to the communities, let's have a popular education within communities so that to understand why are they not supporting Israel, whereas in South Africa we had apartheid. So if we are saying apartheid Israel, what about South Africans who are not supporting even the people of Palestine? So I'm saying to the organization that are having resources, go back to the communities. Let us know what it's all about in Palestine.
Greetings once again. In response to Ubaba, actually, I had written another piece where I, in a sense, tried to title it "The Library." In essence, it means now the lies of the library have been unmasked. In our communities, in the teachings of history, before I got to know much more about Palestine, I thought Israelites were the victims. That's where the lies of the library, the crimes of the library are instilled. Now, we need to now go back and relearn who are Palestine, the history, how everything came about. It now lies with us, those who have the resources to learn, and in connection with organizations such as UNISA, Black House Collective is another organization, EKASI, in which we are taught what it means to be black and the histories and the lives of the library, how they can be unmasked. So that's where the project, the continuation of decolonization now becomes very, very important in our communities. So in support of Ubaba, I come from one of the organizations that are deeply rooted in teaching and educating black kids, because I am a product of an organization that saw we are in a sense still oppressed as young kids living in disadvantaged communities. So Baba, with Black House Collective, we will come back to those communities and reach out, because we are still doing it. I'm a product of that.
Firstly, for very three deeply emotional words of experience. I want to ask a question that maybe you guys have observed globally, but I'm going to reference to a local observation. In South Africa, not being from an academic background, I noticed there's a very interesting way of referring to this horrible war. I hear, for example, euphemisms I hear it on CNN, I listen to the American spokespeople, the word, "we are concerned." I hear it at the UN, etc. And, there's this little cognitive dissonance, and I say, why are these people referring to a horrible situation as "we are concerned"? I've heard those words 3 times today being spoken by people here. Right? And it made me wonder how we echo this same discourse and cleansing of this Zionist project by echoing the same language, not referring to that it's a damn dirty war, as opposed to we are very concerned about people dying. And then I listened to radio stations here in South Africa, and I hear they talk about the Israeli operation. I don't know if this type of language, I'm kind of saying this is horrible language to refer to the killing of people as an operation. Then I hear about our relationships with, firstly, there's something else we thought about over here. What about Israel that makes every university in South Africa also want to invest in that country? I'm confused. Maybe I know people know something about it, but here's the thing that we're referring to, is that I noticed the culture of fear among so many academics. I have a lot of academic friends. SAISA, Psychological Association of South Africa. I've yet to hear a group of psychologists convene a platform like this in the face of the world and say, we condemn, and try to deconstruct psychologically. Hear silence a lot of academics, but I don't feel angry at them. I think the Zionist project in the culture of fear is so well entrenched across the world. I'm just wondering if our guests over there have experienced similar in different countries. So forgive me if I insulted anybody here. Right? So I just wanted to ask.
Thank you to all the speakers and to our guests who have also been very courageous to come here and to speak to us. So I'm speaking from a publishing background. I'm with Wits University Press, and I'm just wondering how from within Israel, in terms of the books that you've written and the articles that you've both published also to Devon, are the books, are your words, are your writings available within the country? Because what kind of conscientizing is happening within the population in Israel? Thank you.
Before we take more hands, I'm just going to give back to our panel. But before that,
okay, thank you, yes. I think I'll try to respond. There's many different comments and questions that were, I appreciate the engagement, and I'll try to weave my response into a few of them, if possible. Maybe, in some ways, starting with what the first comment, which I appreciated a lot, this piece, I heard almost an urgency in your voice. Brother, as you raised the importance of going directly, taking and acting in protest. And I'll connect that to the comment that you offered on this corner, my other brother here, who said, can you elaborate more on grief and hope? I think in many ways, this is a moment where, as we protest, we put our lives on the line, right? And you need courage, right? I think that's an important question. So I think these comments are all connected, right? We definitely do not have spineless academics here. We have academics who are warriors, right? And I think all of us here understand that we come together, not, I would say talking is one thing we're doing, but we're feeling, right? We're gathering, right? We're thinking. These are all powerful tools that humans have always used, and other animals as well. And that spirit has taught us is what liberates us always. And so this is the space that is much more than academic. For me, this is a space that my whole life has brought me to be sitting next to Professor Nalada, to be with my brothers here, to be with my love, right? This is here a space that is a space of grief. I'll go back to this grief because, and this is something that I've been working on at the level of my spirit, guided by elders, guided by ancestors, guided by my children, which is that you can't love if you can't grieve. You cannot love if you cannot grieve. So when we go and protest, it won't be a protest guided by radical love if you haven't done your grief work. Maybe you'll have a perspective you want to push. That's fine. That's different than radical change. Radical change requires that we do our grief work so that the hope is not something that it's in the clouds, but you embody it. You had asked about hope, that it doesn't feel debilitating. The hope I was speaking to is about my brother who's in a wheelchair, who is debilitated. It was about, as Professor Nalada spoke to, about the father holding the bags of his mutilated children. The horror, the despair, the debilitation is there. And hope doesn't put that away. It actually, as Professor Nalada teaches us, it enlives us, which is what our student movements are. Our student movements are nothing more than that radical grief, right? That says, we insist on the value of our dead. And that goes back to what Brother Hugo was speaking to, right? This importance of how we treat our dead is of paramount importance, that we need to be very deliberate. And this is what we see our students doing, to say it's time that we're much more deliberate, we're much more courageous, and we get a spine. So, thank you.
Yeah. I just want to respond to the importance of language, of naming, of framing, of saying things as they are. So I think that this is something that we, as activists, as academics, as feminists, as humans, should insist on and never shy away from. So what is happening in Gaza is a genocide, and we should not say and start questioning. What you were raising is we have concerns, and the history, feminist history of gender violence shows that it took so long for humanity to acknowledge rape as a war crime. It was not acknowledged in previous genocides. It was not called a state crime, or it was not considered a crime until a specific incident in a specific place. But later, in Rwanda, we did not look at it as such because it was not raised, framed, named, and called. So the question is concerns about bodies that do not count, and criminalities are considered when bodies are counted. So the question really is an ontological question, really an ontological. It goes back to my theorization on Ashla, is when a black body is not counted or is perceived as ontologically non-being, of course, people might raise concerns, but these are not criminalities of the state, for example, in the case of George Floyd and in the case of racism in other places, in Africa and what we see. So I guess it's very important, at least for us, in producing knowledge, is really refuse epistemic violence, and calling it concern is epistemic violence. That's my position.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'm going to call on Knox, Norma, and Jade just to do our closing for us. Please do share contacts. It doesn't mean that when we close here, you don't have to talk anymore. So further engagements can still take place afterwards.
Okay, so I'll stand on the side so I don't have my back to. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not really here to do much. Afternoon, colleagues. My name is Nokolo Domani, and I'm a junior researcher at the Institute for Social and Health Sciences. And I am with my colleagues, Noma Gugungwenya and Jade Mokel. And it is our privilege to give the vote of thanks on behalf of UNISA's Institute for Social and Health Sciences and the College of Human Sciences. So first, to our esteemed colleagues or guests, Prof. Nadira Shalhoub Kovakian, Prof. Devin Attila, and Prof. Sarah Ihmud, thank you for honoring our invitation and for your profound contributions here today. We do appreciate you. And to our respondents, Prof. Hugo Gakenam, Prof. Shahana Rasul, and Zandi Khadebe, thank you for carefully and creatively engaging the speaker's thoughts and provocations today. Your remarks have added depth and context to today's discussion and further enhanced the overall learning experience for us all. And then to Sani, Jamilia, Duduzile, thank you for sharing your craft with us and for reminding us of the different ways we can continue to critically use our voices in pursuit of revelation. To our executive dean, who could not be with us today, Prof. Zetungosi, thank you for your continued support. And then to our colleagues at the ISHS, with a special mention of our admin team, thank you for your tireless efforts and support in making this event a success. And then we would like to also thank Emirates Professor Muhammad Sidat, who instigated the plan. Who instigated the plan to have Prof. Nadira with us here today in South Africa. And then to Dr. Fatima Sidat and Prof. Seth Cooper from the Psychological Society of South Africa and the Pan-African Psychological Union for quietly lending support behind the scenes. We appreciate you. And then to Constitution Hill, to Sumaya Gaza and her team, to Natasha and her team for the services and support they have provided us for the event. We thank you. And then lastly to you, the audience and our guests, thank you for enriching and keeping the discussion engaging today. As we leave here today, may we carry forward the knowledge and insights shared by our guests and speakers, and let these words serve as a beacon of hope in our academic and activist pursuits. Enkosi, siyabonga, bayadanki. Thank you.
Free Palestine. Palestine will be free. Thank you. Also, just to close off, we want to show a token of appreciation for our guests of honor. If you could please come back to the stage. Sorry. Thank you. For you, Professor Nadira. Thank you. You're welcome. And for Professor Vanatala, thank you so much. Thank you. Professor Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you. And last but not least, for our respondents, thank you. They're all pink. It was Mother's Day this weekend. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, darling.
Good afternoon, everyone. I promise this is the last act. In closing, quickly. So we are reminded of the profound importance of enacting liberatory, compassionate scholarship and activism in a world fraught with challenges. So our fellowship program stands as a beacon seeking to support and to provoke such endeavors. In acknowledging the diverse ways individuals across different contexts, as we have heard today, and settings express solidarity, we reinforce the call for ongoing decolonial action amidst a landscape of intersecting crises. Today, we are compelled to reflect on one such struggle, that of the Palestinian people. We invite you now to witness a short video that encapsulates the stark realities faced by the Palestinian people, and it serves as a poignant reminder of the ongoing struggles for justice, dignity, and liberation that resonate far beyond the Palestinian borders. May this video serve as a catalyst and an inspiration for meaningful action as we continue our collective journey towards a more just and equitable society. Thank you from all of us.
ايش رسالتك للعالم؟ انه يوقفوا هذه الحال. انتم حرمتم شو؟ حرمت انا كثير من حقوقي، حق التعليم، حق الحريه، حق افعال، حق حلمي في المستقبل، حرمت من مدرستي، من كامل
ليت الأطفال لا يموتون، ليتهم يرفعون إلى السماء مؤقتا ريثما تنتهي الحرب.
ايش رسالتك للعالم؟
good Lord, rising up from Palestine.
Never, unexpected feelings running in my brain.